Over the course of 2017, the Education Relief Foundation organized, as you are all aware now, a series of regional high-level stakeholder meetings for Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, and the Global North. And we did so, not because we were on some kind of a promotional tour. We did so because it is at the very core of the ideas we defend. It is at the very core of the convictions that we have, that stakeholders, regional stakeholders, are the most qualified to understand their region, their nation, and their contexts more broadly. And throughout these meetings, where we brought together ministries of education, academic bodies, international organizations, non-governmental organizations, the purpose was to have a cross-sectoral, comprehensive view of the stakeholders about the ideas that we were defending, promoting, developing in terms of balanced and inclusive education. And the idea was to receive commends, of course, but most importantly, the critiques that the stakeholders would articulate. To have their views, their experiences about the policies that they have applied in their countries, in their regions, their sectors. To see whether they had applied anything similar to one of the 4 pillars of balanced and inclusive education. If it had worked, if it hadn't. Whether they believed that these principles could answer some of the aspirations of their communities. Whether some of these policies could resolve some of the challenges that they face. And out of each of these meetings, we collated a set of recommendation papers, which, after a year of regional consultations, we presented at the first ForumBIE 2030, which was held at the United Nations in Geneva, and which brought together 85 delegates from across the world, from country ambassadors to, again, international organizations, academic bodies, and civil society. And I will allow myself this digression. For on this planetary Titanic, once again, we can no longer compartmentalize sectors. We must work together. And this is at the core of what we have sought to do at ERF. So at this first forum, on the 8th of December 2017, we presented the recommendation papers received from the regional stakeholders. And at this same forum, we had the great honor, the privilege, but also the burden of receiving a mandate from the 85 stakeholders, as diverse as UNESCO's International Bureau of Education, Uganda's National Curriculum Development Center, or the Unión de Responsabilidad Social Universitaria Latinoamericana, to develop a global guide of ethics, principles, policies and practices of balanced and inclusive education, based upon the regional recommendations. And I am delighted to say that we did not take this task lightly. And we immediately started developing such a guide, both with our consultative expert working group and invited international experts from various countries, sectors, and importantly, I think, generations. And less than a year later, ladies and gentlemen, less than a year later, it is my great honor, my privilege, to announce that we hereby launch the first volume of the Global Guide. And I will allow myself very brief remarks, for I know that we have a moderator that has put a watch on my podium. Very brief remarks about this guide, and then I will leave our contributing authors to explain its contents, to explain its philosophy. This guide, ladies and gentlemen, must be approached as a conceptual and technical framework, a very broad framework to be able to articulate, develop, and implement pilot projects across the world for two purposes. One, to revise this first edition in light of the pilots. But second, and most importantly, with the knowledge that, and I will say something that I had not planned to say, in public at least, that this guide is absolutely useless. It is useless because balanced and inclusive education is at its very core based upon the principle of contextualization, of respecting the local, the community, the aspirations of a nation. And to have a guide, a global guide, to be applied without any kind of discrimination, in the same way, everywhere, would in fact be unbalanced and exclusive. So the second purpose of those pilots will be to develop a volume 2, a volume 3, a volume 4 that are contextual, that are adapted to the region in which the pilot was run. But this cannot happen, ladies and gentlemen, without the proactive involvement, without the protagonism of the national and local stakeholders from across sectors, ministries of education again, academic bodies, civil society. And therefore, our hope is that this launch will provide us the opportunity, combined with the international call tomorrow, to articulate such a plan of action, that we may move beyond words to action. You may have noticed that one of my favorite writers is, of course, and thinkers, is Paulo Freire. And Freire identifies, quite rightly, that words, the true word, is persistently, constantly, a combination of a verb and an action, of a word and action. They cannot be dissociated. The true word is a praxis. And if we are to collectively achieve the future for which we all, I know, aspire. We must beware not to fall into what Paulo Freire says, which is words without action, which therefore only becomes verbosity, nor indeed action without words, which falls into mindless activism. Ours are the forces of union, not disjunction.